Proverbs 18. Through desire a man, having separated himself, seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom. A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. When the wicked cometh, then cometh also contempt, and with ignominy reproach. The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and the wellspring of wisdom as a flowing brook. It is not good to accept the person of the wicked, to overthrow the righteous in judgment. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. He also that is slothful in his work is brother to him that is a great waster. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it, and is safe. The rich man's wealth is his strong city, and as an high wall in his own conceit. Before destruction the heart of man is haughty, and before honour is humility. He that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. A man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men. He that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbour cometh and searcheth him. The lot causeth contentions to cease, and parteth between the mighty. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. A man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and with the increase of his lips shall he be filled. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favour of the Lord. The poor useth entreaties, but the rich answereth roughly. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother.
Good evening. It's Friday, October 3rd, 2014. Sorry about the beginning. I forgot to start the broadcast on my Wirecast program, so you got audio but no video of the intro. But you've seen it a million times. I need to make a new one. Anyway, got a lot of news. Everything covering from Ferguson to, of course, Ebola is again and will be in the news for quite a while. Got some news about a machine that was designed to make guns, to make an AR-15 style rifle, and a company that had designed it, and it immediately sold out. I personally think that's some pretty exciting news. Hopefully they can build more machines and they get out there, because if you can build so much of a rifle, then it doesn't have to be registered. You don't have to have a serial number for that weapon. And I'm in full support of shall not be infringed. So before we get started with anything else, let's go ahead and get suspicious observers out of the way, and then we'll start out with some news about the DB68, the enterovirus that's going around. But before that, enjoy some suspicious observers, and I'll see you in a moment.
Good morning, folks. The departing sunspots did what we've seen the majority of the time since late 2011. They waited to fire until they left the Earth-facing disk. A large coronal mass ejection was produced by the solar flare that registered M7.3, fairly large M-class blast. As we've seen numerous times as well, it appears a pre-flare event occurred and aided in the destabilization that eventually became the solar flare. As you can imagine, with the position of the blast, the CME is not at all Earth-directed. The sunspots continue their decay on a path to possible trough. It all depends on what's coming in behind the southeastern limb, which decided to pop one off this morning as well. Much smaller of an eruption, and this one was mostly filamentary. So the southern coronal hole is departed. The northern coronal hole swung through Earth-facing position the last 24 hours, a southern extension of the northern polar opening. An earthquake that definitively rang in 6 magnitude range in far eastern Russia was downgraded to 5.7 by the USGS. Also took another tremor in China. This morning, a 5.3 that also hit 6 on one reader struck Japan. The two oddest quakes of the day hit Kansas, actually rang into 5 range on some meters, and another between Canada and Greenland in Baffin Bay. We've got a number of new seafloor maps and visualizations available from Scripps. They are mapping terrain, gravitational anomalies, and other topographical features. It's well worth checking out. We also found a guy who flew a drone into the Iceland volcano zone. Apparently his GoPro camera melted. They were able to recover the memory card, however. Solid article out from NOAA discussing how their global warming models suggest the Colorado floods from about this time last year were not due to our emissions. Their models actually suggest less rain in these areas. They did not include solar activity, which, by the way, we have yet another article about. For those just joining the party, the IPCC had to admit that we've had no real global warming for nearly 2 decades, so scientists around the world went to work trying to fix the flawed models, which again completely ignore a solar influence. But we're now well over 200 papers in the last 3 years explaining why most of climate change is caused by our star. Right below the video, you will find a link to our climate change playlist. It explains this in good detail. Wu Yen candidate fan phone strengthened incredibly and is ready to clip Japan. Right behind that is our next candidate, yet to be named, but following right in the wake. Perhaps the Japan quake we showed had an Earth spot connection. Meanwhile, Simon could be a problem. It appears that most models suggest it will trek towards the U.S. Southwest, as we've seen a number of times this year already. More flooding could be just days away. Meanwhile, we've got a perfect example of the climate extremes event taking place. In the northern hemisphere, low pressure sucks in counterclockwise, while high pressure pushes outward clockwise. Where they meet in the middle, they're always pushing in the same direction. The strong low is ripping moisture and heat up the leading east edge, which is causing unseasonably warm temperatures for that region. But on the backside, we're getting an equally strong flow to the south. The unseasonable heat is followed by bad storms as the convergence smashes together air evacuating vastly different moisture, heat, and potential, causing an energetic release, while major cold and snow events trail the system on the western side. Areas see the full scope of climate extremes in as little as 72 hours. We've got a similar counterclockwise driving low still atop Iceland, reinforced by the high-pressure system to the south. Where's their convergence going? Right over top the major flood warnings this evening. Iceland's still getting dumped on as well, right beneath the low. In Australia, we've got a weak low regulating some rain for the west, but the primary story is a heavy moisture flow heading atop New Zealand. That'll be the worst alert. Helio Viewer is not cooperating, so we hit SDO and ISWA for shots of our star to close. Eyes open, no fear. It's 6:15 a.m. Eastern Time, and that's the news. Be safe, everyone.
All right, thanks to Ben Davison, Suspicious Observers. The link's in the About tab as always. And I'm a little discombobulated, I do believe. trying to get the slider back to the right place. Anyway, it's close. All right, so I do believe it almost appears that Facebook's having issues again. So they were having issues yesterday, and I had to really fight from calling the National Guard in, but I managed. It was okay. I just took some deep breaths. Near disaster when Facebook goes down. Anyway, so that was Suspicious Observers. Some odd quakes there, especially the one up by Greenland. That one's real interesting, I thought. So let's go ahead and get started what I have for you. 2 children treated for paralysis in St. Louis, linked to rare enterovirus 68 probed. Well, the interesting thing is somebody else was making a comment today on my Facebook about Hungarian flu, and kind of more or less connecting the two. And I'm no doctor. I don't know if they're both one and the same, but if that's true, that's very interesting to say the least. But anyway, it goes on to say doctors at St. Louis Children's Hospital are seeing children for muscle weakness or even paralysis, which is possibly related to the rare enterovirus 68. I wouldn't call it too rare these days. 2 children are being treated in St. Louis for severe symptom, muscle weakness or paralysis that could be linked to the enterovirus. Paralysis that occurs when a virus attacks the spinal cord can be temporary or long-lasting. Over the last few months, hundreds of children from the St. Louis area have been treated for severe respiratory illnesses. Some of those cases were linked to enterovirus 68. We do occasionally see cases like this, and typically it's very hard for us to define what the cause is, said Dr. Greg Storch. Usually it's a viral infection, but it is difficult to link to a specific virus. Doctors say the paralysis should not be those suffering from the virus. We think this is a small part of the overall enterovirus D68 outbreak, but that outbreak has been very large and has caused us to see increased number in patients at the ER and increased number of patients in the intensive care unit, Storch said. Children, not adults, are most susceptible to the virus. Mild symptoms tend to include cough, fever, runny nose, sneezing, and body aches. If a child starts to lose feeling in their limbs, medical help should be sought immediately. I would hope that should, be able to be without being said. I mean, come on. I mean, if your child loses feeling in their limbs, I don't think anybody should have to tell you. But anyway, what scares me, and I'm not a virologist or anything like that, but boy, if this Ebola thing could somehow mutate, link with the enterovirus, that would be a complete recipe for disaster. So even though we don't know enough about Ebola to know exactly how communicable it is, I think it's a lot more than what they're admitting to. So anyway, let's get on to Ferguson. I've got a little bit. I was slacking last night. Normally I'm watching a video, I'm watching live feed, and I'm on it. And by the time I actually brought it up on the live streams, it was pretty much calmed down. There was some arrests made and whatnot, and that happened before I turned it on, so I didn't get to personally see what happened. But Ferguson officials working on evacuation plans for businesses and residents. And I thought I would bring this up and point this out because it almost seems like they are expecting or suspecting something. And I wanted to point this out just to make people aware. The business is located in the vicinity of West Florissant, just minutes away from Quick Trip gas station that was torched in Ferguson. Ferguson city officials are working on evacuation plans if Officer Darren Wilson is not indicted in the shooting death of 18-year-old robber Michael Brown. I love how they threw in robber there. Ferguson officials are working on plans to alert residents in case of future unrest. According to public relations strategist Devin James, who said he still represents the city on a pro bono basis. Say, for example, if there is an outbreak of something that goes on tonight and a protest goes from peaceful to violent, what are we supposed to tell residents to do? Are we supposed to tell them to evacuate? The National Guard is coming in? So a lot of those types of conversations are what they're working on now, James said. City officials are preparing for all possible outcomes of the grand jury's investigation into the shooting death of Michael Brown, James said. I'm just being real. If there's no indictment and there's an evacuation situation, then we need to be prepared for that, he said. If there's an indictment and there's celebratory unrest, we need to be prepared for that. The city and law enforcement agencies are looking at all scenarios. So I wanted to point that out. I wanted to bring that up. And the reason being is because obviously it seems like they have a hunch on what this outcome is going to be. And I've heard different individuals say it themselves that if Darren Wilson walks, it's going to get ugly. So, you know, I don't speak for them. Well, all I can tell you is if you live in that area, be ready, be prepared. Just like anything else, be prepared. Got a couple, well, one in particular person I went to school with lives right there in Ferguson. So, yeah, it can, something like this can happen anywhere. And just be ready because it could get ugly. It just seems, I just wouldn't think they would be going through this type of detail unless they were pretty sure. But anyway, let's get on to the other article I have for Ferguson. Some questioning the latest round of Ferguson arrests. And this is what I missed last night. About a dozen protesters were jailed after being arrested during Thursday's protests in Ferguson. And it has some local officials and rights groups questioning if police overreacted. A small number of police headquarters, the latest of several protests since the August 9th shooting death of Michael Brown by Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson. Protesters want Wilson, who is white, to be, I love how they got to put that in, to be charged in the killing of Brown. See, you got to watch news media because they will slip little words in that will try and incite a reaction out of you. And it's important that you notice these little words, these things added, because when you think about something, you always want to think logically. You don't want to think emotionally, because if you think emotionally, then opinions start rolling out. And opinions can be a very dangerous thing, especially if that opinion is based on wrong data. So anyway, it's just every time I see that, you know. Okay, to be charged in the killing of Brown, 18, who was black and unarmed. A grand jury investigation is expected to last into November. So, you know, the thing of it is like I say, those words are put in there to incite a reaction, to incite an emotional response. It shouldn't be about black. It shouldn't be about white. It should be bad enough, period, that we have police officers that are just going crazy. So, I mean, that should be the focus. You know, Morgan Freeman said it best. The best way to stop racism is to stop talking about it. And he doesn't mean shove it under the rug and act like it doesn't exist. But the more and more people talk about it, the more and more it's going to be in everybody's face, and the more and more tension that's going to be brought up. You know, it's not. I've seen so many people make comments about the Ferguson thing, about how they're over it, or however that, you know, they word it, and it's just they're tired of hearing the same arguments. You know, people that don't have stake in it. I mean, I'm talking about people I know that are not, for instance, people I know that aren't racist. Okay, they're just tired of hearing it, and it's not that they're racist. It's not. I'm sure black people are tired of living it. I'm not saying that it's a discussion that we should sweep under the rug. We shouldn't deal with it or anything like that. But there's got to be a better way, because there's nothing that's happening. We're just spinning our wheels here. That's all that's happening. You've got one side that's arguing, the other side that's arguing, and there's no progress. Absolutely none. You know, I mean, I know we've got things like hate crimes as laws and everything like that, but, you know, if they made meth illegal, then maybe it wouldn't be on the streets anymore. Think about that. So, you know, we need to find a better way to deal with everything from racism to the meth problem. You know, it just seems, just doesn't make sense. But anyway, the reason for arrests. Oh well, I skipped a paragraph. I better not do that. Just before midnight, officers began moving toward the protesters, who were chanting, used plastic restraints on their wrists, and put them in a van, according to Gabrielle Hansen, who was at the scene while her mother, freelance videographer Mary Moore, shot video. Moore was among those arrested. Hansen was not. The reason for the arrest wasn't immediately clear. Patricia Bynes, a Democratic committee woman from the Ferguson area who was at the protest, said protesters were warned against violence-inciting language, but she didn't know what the protesters said. Another local media reports say the protesters were cited for violating a noise ordinance. A Ferguson police spokesman did not respond to messages seeking comment. The protesters were taken to jail in a neighboring St. Anne, and some were placed on 24-hour hold, Bynes said. Tony Rother, an attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union office at St. Louis, and several complaints have been lodged about Thursday's arrest, and the ACLU is investigating. They do appear to be, if not bogus, at least unnecessary arrests, said Rother, who had no details about why the protesters were arrested. He also questioned why they'd be jailed on a 24-hour hold. Holding people unnecessarily long, arresting them when it's not necessary, that's an indication of overreach, Rother said. It certainly appears that the purpose is to discourage people from coming to Ferguson to protest. And of course it is. All of this whole story, from the very beginning, from the day Michael Brown was shot, it's about overreach. And that is why people should be protesting. That is what people should be screaming. Because I'm telling you, you know, they will do everything, including using single words in media to incite that emotional reaction that I was talking about, because that automatically changes it. Right? I don't think it's as much about race as what people are putting into it. I do not. I'm sorry, I don't. I think it was about the militarized police department. I think it was about a cop that has issues. Obviously, he's had issues in the past. That's what it's about. But see, that's why they want to change it to the same old subject that's been battled ever since the beginning of this country, race. Because as long as we're talking about that, as long as we're arguing about race, then we're not pushing for them to get their cops under control. And that is what they don't want. They don't want that. They don't want the people to awaken to the police state. They don't, because there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And they do not want to be put in that position. That's just a fact. It's just a fact. Ferguson police spokesman did not respond to messages seeking comment. The protesters were taken to a jail. Oh, wait, I think I already read that. Sorry. Where are we at? Hundreds of people have been arrested during nearly 2 months of protests in Ferguson, including journalists and clergy members. Wow, that name. Okay. The Reverend was arrested Monday after he sat down on the sidewalk with other protesters and was charged with failure to disperse, a misdemeanor that is most common charge protesters have faced. And I brought that up about that Reverend. That was the night that they prayed for 4.5 minutes, and this Reverend had kneeled back down and started to pray again, and they arrested him. And by the way, failure to disperse. I'm sorry. My First Amendment rights do not recognize a failure to disperse, just like it doesn't recognize having to keep walking during a protest, just like it doesn't recognize free speech zones. Our free speech zones, folks, are called the United States border. Anything within sight of that is a free speech zone. They can't change that. It's just like guns. They keep wanting to add gun laws and all that shall not be infringed. Means no. No. Get your hands off of it. You can't touch it. You can't manipulate it. You can't even look at it funny. That's what our Constitution is for. That's why they're trying to get our children to forget about the Constitution. They're not teaching about the power of that document that gives us power. It takes power away from the federal government. That's what the Constitution of the United States does. It limits the authority of government. Period. It's crazy. Hansen said Moore was shooting video of the arrest when one of the protesters handed her a cell phone. When Moore took it, she was arrested, Hansen said, and officers confiscated her camera. Asked what the protesters were saying or whether they were being noisy, Hansen said they were chanting, "Show me what democracy looks like." And I've heard them do that a million times. Hansen said the family had received no explanation from police and that she had not heard from her mother as of Friday morning. Nobody really knows what's going on, she said. It's ridiculous. And I have a lot of questions too. I actually wonder if there's any threats or anything going on during their incarceration, because I do know that there were reports of Department of Homeland Security flying in when the protests just started right back up. So, yeah, I would like to know if they're being in any way told to quit, basically. So, yeah, that's what's going on in Ferguson. I wanted to do an update on that. And then let's get into what's going on with the gun making machine. And do-it-yourself gun making machine sells out in 36 hours. Wow. I've seen Ozzy Osbourne concerts sell out faster. A milling machine that allows customers to make the body of an AR-15 rifle has sold out in 36 hours. Despite costing $1,200, there was no shortage of buyers as clients wanted to build part of their own gun with no serial number in their own homes. Defense Distributed, and by the way, Defense Distributed is the one they a while back had, and hopefully they don't say this in the article, but a while back they came up with and published the plans, the software plans for the 3D printable guns, if you don't remember. Which the government was all over and threatened them and everything else over it. So coerced them to remove the I don't want to call it a program, but it's a file that you use in the software that you know, it's like saving a Photoshop file or whatnot. They pretty much they threatened them. Told them they had to take it down. But the Defense Distributed, owned by gun rights activist Cody Wilson, managed to sell over 200 computer numerically controlled milling machines called Ghost Gunner, with 175 sold within 24 hours of going on sale. Wilson was surprised at just how quickly his product sold. He had only intended to sell 110 machines, but such is the demand, he now intends to employ more staff to give the public what it wants. People want this machine, Wilson said. Speaking to Wired magazine, people want the battle rifle and the comfort of replicability and the privacy component. They want it and they're buying it. For those who missed out on the original batch, the good news is that Wilson is planning to release more milling machines onto the market. The bad news is they will cost an extra $100, bringing the price up to $1,300. However, given how quickly the first 200 or so sold out, it is unlikely the price rise is going to put too many people off. The Ghost Runner is a PC-connected hardware for manufacturing the lower receiver of the popular AR-15 rifle. The receiver is the control part. The receiver is the control part of the firearm, which houses the operating parts and serves as the frame of the gun. Without it, the weapon is inoperable. It is also where the manufacturer places the serial number as required by law. The U.S. allows for creating a firearm from parts or kits, according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which states an unlicensed individual may make a firearm as defined in the GCA for his own personal use, but not for sale or distribution. As a way to get around this law, manufacturers can make a semi-finished lower receiver that, quote-unquote, isn't technically a gun, but gets as close to the line as possible. Ars Technica reported the metal piece is usually 80% finished and can be purchased from a variety of companies. Now, there was another company, and I can't remember the name of them, but they were out there in California, and they were doing these 80% lowers. And then you could buy just a little bit of, it wasn't machines or nothing, but you could buy like these little, they call them a jig. You could buy a jig and finish machining the stuff yourself at home. And that was the same company that was raided by the government, as a matter of fact. They were threatened, told it was illegal and everything else. Look, they're doing everything they can to try and scare people from doing this. I wished I knew the name of that company. They also, that was a company that illegally seized the records of the customers of who bought those 80% lowers. So they're doing everything they can, whether it's illegal, whether it's, these are felonies. When you break the Constitution in the way that they're breaking the Constitution, that is a felony. That is a felony. And technically, it wouldn't be a far stretch to charge these individuals and these organizations involved with treason. That's a very serious charge. Very serious charge. Anyway, let's move on from Ferguson to guns. That's a bad combination. To Facebook and healthcare, and then we'll lead into what I have for Ebola. Yeah, and you did hear me correct. Facebook and healthcare. This was on NBC News. The link's down below. Facebook plots first steps into healthcare. Facebook already knows who your friends are and the kind of things that grab your attention. Soon it could also know the state of your health. On the heels of fellow Silicon Valley technology companies, Apple Incorporated and Google, Facebook is plotting its first steps in the fertile field of healthcare, said 3 people familiar with the matter. The people requested anonymity as the plans are still in development. The company is exploring creating online support communities that would connect Facebook users suffering from various ailments. A small team is also considering new preventive care applications that would help people improve their lifestyles. In recent months, the sources said the social networking giant has been holding meetings with medical industry experts and entrepreneurs and is setting up research and development unit to test new health apps. Facebook is still in the idea-gathering stage, the people said. Healthcare has historically been an area of interest for Facebook, but it has taken a backseat to more pressing products. So I wanted to throw that at you. I personally don't like that idea. Man, is Facebook intrusive. It is absolutely getting ridiculous. They have no business or no need to be involved in healthcare. Wow, it's scary. It is. It's gotten pretty ridiculous, I think. Oh wow, I lost video. It would appear. I am sorry. I didn't know I did. Let me see if I can get that back here. I did not know that happened. I apologize. I wonder how long that's been done. It is back. All right. So let me get on with the next stories. We're going to go into Ebola. I've got a couple videos, one from BPEarthWatch and one from another gentleman. on Ebola, and then I've got a couple stories, and we'll talk about it a little bit. So it's something we really, it needs to be on the tip of our tongues, at the front of our minds, because this is getting crazy. This first video I'm going to do is a gentleman that he might have put something very important here. I'll let him explain it. Of course, he does a better job than I could. He understands it apparently more than what I do. So let me play his video, then we'll get to BPEarthWatch, and then we'll go from there.
The Power Blog site, Tuesday, September 30th, 2014. Maximum alert. There's literally a greater than 50% probability that the Dallas Ebola victim acquired his infection or her infection on the airplane they were taking out of Liberia. That means that the person in Dallas is a secondary victim, that there's still a patient zero out there who's actively shedding Ebola on that flight and subsequent flights, whatever they took. Now, this information, the data, comes directly from the Center for Disease Control's very own simulation model. And we'll show you here's a chart from that model. We'll show you detail here, what this chart shows. Now, basically, it shows that the mean time to infection is 5.5 days. What that means is half of the people who get Ebola develop symptoms before 5.5 days. The other half of people who get Ebola develop symptoms after 5.5 days. So that's the 50% dividing line. And here's what that graph looks like. You can see there's a very few that stretch further on out, but the majority here, even the most likely point, is 5.5 days. So what does that mean? It means, again, let's look at the chart here. You know, this calendar that was put out by the New York Times. Big hat tip to the New York Times for presenting the data like this. And what it shows is a person boarded the flight on Friday, and then within 6 days, this Wednesday, is when the symptom onset was. That means that they're within that 5.5 day period, which just basically proves that there's greater than a 50% chance that the person in Dallas was infected on the flight. Now, this is potentially catastrophic because there's a potential massive number of secondary victims who have no African travel history and are likely to not attract attention in any emergency room until after massive hemorrhaging has started. And there's no telling where this primary or this patient zero potentially came from or has gone to. As far as we know, there are only 2 airlines that are still periodically flying out of Liberia. One is Royal Moroccan Airlines, and that could be very bad because patient zero might be heading off to the Hajj. It could also be a Belgian airline that's flying through. But basically, anybody who's on that flight should be considered exposed. And anybody in between. There was a layover in Atlanta. This is just an extremely bad situation here. Potentially a massive number of people who have secondary infections that need to be tracked down, who, when they become ill, will not attract attention because they don't fit the stereotype of a Western African Ebola victim. Be prepared.
So that was BPEarthWatch blog on YouTube. I don't think I have his link down below because I ran across this after I'd set the news up. But anyway, interesting point. Wow. So if that is the case, then we have a much bigger concern than what we originally thought. I've also got another video from BPEarthWatch, and we'll go ahead and go right on into that. So I got the videos done and taken care of, and then actually I've got one link about Ebola. I thought I had 2, but that's okay. I've got quite a bit of information that I have up in my head about what's been going on. Part of it's discussions and stuff like that. But anyway, without further ado, here's BPEarthWatch.
October 3rd, 2014. Guys, the whole world's aware of the Ebola problem in Dallas, Texas, with the patient there that has been confirmed And now there's been over 100 people contacted that may be put into isolation. Some already have. But again, as of last night, it was 100 people. The report today has not been updated. But another report has, and I'm going to read part of it because this could be extremely dangerous. This could be the game changer. I want to read this report and some of the history of this virus. It says, today the Ebola virus spreads only through direct contact with bodily fluids such as blood and vomit. But some of the nation's top infectious disease experts are worrying that this deadly virus could mutate and be transmitted just by a cough or a sneeze. Now, one of the guys in the forefront of this is Dr. Michael Osterholm. He's director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. He said, it's the single greatest concern I have had in my 40-year public health career. And this is new information today. I can't imagine anything in my career, and this includes HIV, that would be more devastating to the world than a respiratory transmissible Ebola virus. They're saying every time a new person gets Ebola, the virus gets another chance to mutate and develop new capabilities. Osterholm calls it genetic roulette. Now, as of October 1st, 2 days ago, there had been more than 7,100 cases of Ebola with 3,330 deaths. According to the World Health Organization, which has said the virus is spreading at a much faster rate than it was earlier in the outbreak. That, I think it has a lot to do with this mutation. And you got Big Pharma scrambling, but this thing, guys, since it started, has mutated 300 times. It says Ebola is called an RNA virus, which means every time it copies itself, it makes one or two mutations. Many of those mutations mean nothing, but some of them might be able to change the way the virus behaves inside the human body. Now, if you go back into 1989, when they really started getting concerned, the first one they called Ebola reston, R-E-S-T-O-N, which was transmitted among monkeys by breathing. In 2012, Canadian researchers found that Ebola Zaire, Z-A-I-R-E, which is involved in the current outbreak, was passed from pigs to monkeys in the air. So it is airborne. You understand what I'm saying? Just because it hasn't been transmitted to a human, or they say it hasn't, and they're really scrambling because as they're fighting this, they're saying they're being overcome by the mutational jumps. But Dr. James Leduc, director of the Galveston, Texas National Laboratory at the University of Texas, said the problem is that no one is keeping track of the mutations. Says, so no one really knows what the virus has become. This is today, this report. One group of the researchers looked at how Ebola changed over a short period of time in just one area in Sierra Leone. Early in the outbreak, says before it was spreading as fast as it is now, they found 300 genetic changes in the virus. It's frightening, he said, to look at how much the virus mutated within just 3 weeks. Guys, do you understand what I'm saying? We've had I guess technically it was not a Trojan horse enter Dallas if it was unintentional, which more than likely it was. It was, if you think about this, the way this happened. The guy came to the United States from Africa, and he lied to the people there that screened him before he flew out. Said he had no symptoms, but he knew if he stayed there, he would die. We put in one of these camps. Looks like a bad dream of a FEMA camp to isolate these folks, guys. But he had that choice, and he knew that he would probably pay some type of price if he lived, but it would be better than death to him. And if you think about that, he did exactly the wrong thing. Out of self-preservation, he risked the outspread of an entire nation, and this nation is connected to Canada and Mexico. And one thing they're not talking about for you guys in the Harvard area is that they have taken that virus there 3 weeks ago and started these tests, and that is where Dr. Pardis Sabetta, an associate professor at Harvard and senior associate member of the Broad Institute, is saying that they're watching it mutate 300 times in 3 weeks. He said Osterholm, who was a part of this project, he said he commended groups like Doctors Without Borders, but said uncoordinated efforts by individual organizations are no match for Ebola spreading swiftly through urban areas. This is largely dysfunctional. Nobody's in command. CDC, are you listening? Atlanta, Georgia. Phone call. And nobody's in charge, he said. It's like not having air traffic control at an airport. The planes would just crash into each other. And that's what we're dealing with this dysfunctional government that we have. The CDC should have been in touch with every hospital in the nation automatically, with any information automatically, but no. But don't forget Big Pharma. Don't forget that. But guys, let's look at another thing. You've got a very large populated area. I've been through Dallas-Fort Worth several times. Large airport, Dallas Cowboy football games, Halloween coming up, major events. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to you and your children? You better be very aware of shopping malls. Again, that airport and the school. Guys, they're showing pictures of the apartment that now they're going in and trying to clean and pressure wash the sidewalks and do some stuff. And it's got an address on it. And I want to show you that because they need to be talking about this. Now, let's take a look at this Dallas area. Guys, we'll pull this up right here. Now, this is 7225 Fair Oaks Drive. You can see North Collins Street. Here's Brown Road. There's a McDonald's, Chester W. Ditto Golf Course, and this is called Crystal Canyon Natural Area. And this is Fair Oaks Drive and the apartment complexes, guys. Now we're dealing with this area. We know the airport and the hospital. Let's kind of do a triangulation. You know, like I said, I've been through Dallas a couple of times, guys, but I'm not familiar with the area. But this is basically your triangulation when you're dealing with. He came into the airport here. This is the apartments in North Arlington. This is the hospital. From there, he went to the hospital here over north of Dallas. You see this inside the loop. Back home. And back to the hospital. That puts us basically in this triangle. Now, where else he went, we don't know. This is only the information we have from the reports. But guys, think about the area and the amount of people that are involved in this. And think about the schools. He said they were grade school age children, over 100 people now. And we're dealing with something that can mutate 100 times per week. Guys, this is a heads up. We're going to be watching it. Also, 2 more coronal mass ejections from the sun today. The heat's going to continue, left side and right side, just like we saw yesterday. Now, we talked about this, and I had a tremendous amount of comments yesterday that everyone else felt that heat that started before daylight here in the east and central U.S. And it reports all the way to Australia of that intense heating yesterday. Now, if you think about it, also in Dallas last night, there was extreme storms. Power went out. Roofs were blown off buildings. They were very high winds across the nation. Now it's moving across Florida and out as the cooler air comes in. But that when you superheat this upper ionosphere of the Earth, and the Earth is trying to go into its fall season, getting cooler in this part of the country, or this part of the planet, you have an extreme contrast. Unnatural heat from the CMEs combining with this cooling air, and the Earth's magnetic poles are off tilt. We've talked about this before. It's throwing everything out of whack, especially on these days when you're watching a cool front that is going to move through your area this time of year, and you have coronal mass ejections. Watch for extreme wind and extreme lightning. Power transformers were going out in this also last night. A lot of them in the Dallas area. But it's a heads up, guys. We're watching it. Be safe.
And a little update there about the sun from BPEarthWatch BN. Now that link is down in the About tab. If you want to see that, it is down there. So the story that I have for you is pulling it up now. This is been paying close attention to the news today, the old news to you. A patient being evaluated for possible Ebola at DC Howard University Hospital. And let me make sure that, okay, yeah, it still hadn't been updated from there. I think it's down there. I'm going to go ahead and let the video play.
Normal here at Howard University Hospital, but it's anything but. Deep within the environs of this facility, there are some special protocols which are underway because they have a patient here who shows some signs of Ebola. Now, it's not a case of Ebola. A case of Ebola has not been verified, but they are wanting to err on the side of caution. A patient at Howard University Hospital who has showed what they're calling Ebola-like symptoms and has traveled recently to Nigeria is being watched closely. There's been no indication that the patient has Ebola or has been exposed to the virus, but that patient is nonetheless being tested and quarantined. A statement from the hospital says, in part, out of an abundance of caution, they are activating the appropriate infection control protocols, including isolating the patient. The symptoms usually don't present themselves until 2 to 21 days after a person is exposed, and exposure requires that a person come into contact with someone who is already infected, contact with bodily fluids especially. That can make healthcare workers among the most susceptible if precautions aren't taken. As for any patient with Ebola, there's no cure, and only the symptoms can be treated.
Some of my best undergraduate students became physicians, and they know exactly what to do. And if they're on it, they'll get it straight. I just wish they would have told us sooner.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that monitoring a patient is vital, especially when you consider that other diseases like malaria can often present some of the same symptoms.
I think it's very important that any Howard student, any faculty of the university takes the right precautions in terms of protecting themselves and being knowledgeable about the situation that's going on today.
Now, let's put this in perspective. Since late July, there have been 100 consultations. That's where a local hospital or authority will contact the CDC and say, hey, we've got someone who looks like they have Ebola. Now, out of that 100, 15 have resulted in tests. And out of those 15 tests, there's only been one confirmed case. And hopefully officials here are thinking, well, that's not what they have. We are live in Northwest. Derek Ward, News 4.
So there you have it. And there has been talk of Utah, among other places. So I don't know what to say or tell you, or any combination of those words together. Yeah, it's absurd. This is going to be a very fast, not only the disease itself, the virus itself, but this whole situation is going to be very fast-paced, very fast-moving, because they still have not just came out and told people the risks. And that makes me highly suspicious. It really does. Sure, they could just be trying to prevent mass panic. But, you know, it's probably not, if you've listened to this show, it's probably not the first time that I've said I just don't trust them. And I don't. You know, it seems to me like, you know, they talked about how this virus is mutated like 300 times, okay? And so that every patient to every other patient, it mutates again. It's a lot to think about. So, you know, it makes me wonder if possibly they're just trying to buy a little bit of time. And with that time that they buy, it will spread, and then they can turn around and say, oh, well, we didn't know, or it mutated and we didn't know. Now it is airborne. Now half the country's infected. You know, so we have to be very, very vigilant as to how we deal with this. Like I've told you before, I highly recommend, you know, this weekend would be a good time to talk with family and loved ones and whatnot. Try and get a plan together. Try and get some extra food together, a way to filter water. You know the drill. And I'll repeat it. 4 ways in this order to be prepared. Number 1, spiritually. Number 2, mentally. Number 3, intellectually. And number 4, physically. And I've gone over several times about why I place it in that order. Of course, you should always put spiritually first with anything at any time, because that's going to give you your strength. Regardless, no matter what happens, you can look to God, and He will give you strength. Second is mentally, because if you lose it, mentally lose it, it doesn't matter what kind of preparations you have. None of that matters, not at all. So second is mentally, and if you start to lose it mentally, go to number 1. Number 3, intellectually. Have the knowledge of how to adapt, how to make something out of nothing. I've talked on this show about building makeshift Faraday cages, building makeshift water filters. That's all covered under intellectually. And I would highly recommend that if you don't know about gasifiers or how to build a gasifier, spend time this weekend learning. You better do this now, because I'll tell you what, if this starts spreading, you can expect at least the internet to be shut down. I'm telling you. Anyway, the last is physically. Because again, if you flip out, mentally just can't take it, it doesn't matter what you have, you won't be able to effectively use it. Or you'll use it when you don't need it. That's the worst thing. When I was flying ultralight airplanes, that was something we talked about when it came to the emergency parachutes that you can install on one. Most of the time, it would seem they were deployed when they didn't need to be deployed. I mean, yeah, you may be thinking a big commercial jetliner or something like that. So, but no, these are little ultralight airplanes. If an engine goes out or you run out of fuel, that should just be an inconvenience. Really should, in an ultralight aircraft. You're not looking at a crash situation because your engine's no longer running. You're looking at a glider situation. And as long as you're not over water, over trees, you're supposed to fly high enough so you can clear those kind of obstacles and get into a cleared area to where you can emergency land. You're always supposed to be thinking that. So most of the time that those parachutes, those BRS systems as they call them, were deployed, they were deployed unnecessarily. So, and that's, anytime you're in that kind of a situation, it's dangerous. Really is. So, just again, talk with your family, talk with your loved ones, get a plan together, get a few items together, and go from there. So anyway, I'm gonna get off here so I can enjoy my weekend, and I implore that you all enjoy your weekend, along with talking to your family and loved ones about Ebola and preparedness and all that good stuff. But hang in there. We'll get through this. We just got to use our heads. So we got to do so logically, not emotionally. So hang in there, and I will see you Monday, God willing. May God bless you. May He walk with you. Be one with your spirit. I love you all. I will talk to you Monday. Good night. Have a good weekend.